What's going on, guys? CultofMush back at it with another video, and in this video I want to talk about frame rate, but more specifically 30 frames per second and whether or not that frame rate is playable. Now, if you guys are accustomed to console gaming, chances are 30 frames per second is what you guys are used to. There are definitely games that run at 60 frames per second on those consoles, but a lot of the more graphically demanding titles on console like Killzone Shadowfall, The Witcher 3 do run at 30 frames per second. And I'll give you guys my side to it. Before I even ever got into PC gaming and I was playing games on the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360, I never got what frame rate was really all about. I would read online on people talking about how it sucks that all these games are at 30 frames per second and why can't we play games at 60 frames per second, and I never really understood it and I never really saw the difference. Keep in mind there were games like Call of Duty on the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360 that did run at 60 frames per second, but honestly at the time while I was playing those console games I never really noticed the difference between Call of Duty and a game like Red Dead Redemption, where Call of Duty was running at 60 FPS but Red Dead was running at 30. Now that all changed when I actually did start PC gaming. I don't know if it was because I was playing on a monitor, so everything was a lot easier to see, or if it was because on console, it really just is Call of Duty that's running at 60 FPS. I think some of the sports games also do, like Forza, but I never really played those games, and the majority of the titles I was playing on consoles were running at 30 FPS. Then when I got to PC gaming and I started playing games like Skyrim at 60 FPS, Max Payne 3 at 60 FPS, I was like, holy shit, there's a big difference. But I never really knew about that while I was console gaming. Wow, this game is 60 FPS. I never noticed that about COD. And almost starting to be a PC gamer in a roundabout way kind of fucked me over, because PC gaming opened up all these 60 frames per second games to me, and literally when I went back to console gaming, even to this day on the PlayStation 4, I tried to give The Witcher a chance on PS4 and I just can't get into these games anymore. If I never had got into PC gaming, I probably could have played The Witcher 3 on PS4 just fine. I probably wouldn't have noticed because I still would have been dumb and ignorant to what 60 FPS is. Now, also a big reason for me not liking The Witcher 3 on PlayStation 4 is because The Witcher 3 on PS4 didn't even run at 30 FPS. I swear to God, it dipped to like 17 frames at times. So that really gets to the topic of this video. Is 30 frames per second playable on PC? I know a lot of you guys want to run all the newest games at 60 FPS, but running those games at 1080p, highest settings at 60 FPS, that's definitely tricky. If you don't have a ton of money to spend on a GPU like the GTX 970 and you're getting something more mid-range, you're probably not going to be playing every game under the sun at 60 FPS, especially the higher end games like The Witcher 3. But is 30 frames per second playable? I think it is. I know a lot of you guys are going to disagree with me. Even in a multiplayer game, I still think 30 frames per second is acceptable. Yes, do you want 60 frames per second? Of course, but a lot of people can't afford a graphics card that can push a game like Battlefield 4 at the highest settings at 60 frames per second, and some of you guys probably are like me. I'm the kind of person that honestly I prefer better visuals over that nice 60 frames per second. I know I'm crazy because a lot of PC gamers always talk about frame rate, but I'm just a graphics whore. I can admit it. I like good visuals. And I don't really think the problem is 30 frames per second entirely. I think a lot of people get stuck on this, oh my god, 30 FPS sucks. I think what sucks even more than 30 frames per second is when a frame rate is all over the fucking place. Look, if a game can stay at 30 FPS locked, fine, it's playable. I can deal with it. Then there are games, whether they be bad ports or they're just super hard to run, they'll run at 60 FPS at times, then they'll dip to 30 FPS, then at real intensive scenes they'll dip even lower. That is what I find annoying, and I think that's what most PC gamers actually think is pretty lame. I'm pretty sure The Witcher 3 was advertised to run at 30 frames per second on the PS4. If it was a locked 30 frames per second, honestly, most people probably could play it. And I should say most PC gamers because there's definitely a lot of console gamers that are playing Witcher 3 just fine on console. If it was a locked 30 frames per second, I think I myself would be able to play it, but it's not a locked 30 frames per second. It's 30 frames per second, and then in more intensive parts of the game, it'll dip to 25 frames per second, then 20 frames per second, and it's just all over the place. Just give me a locked frame rate. That's what I want more than anything else. Even if a game is running at 60 frames per second, if that game's frame rate is all over the place, if it's going from 60 to 30 constantly, I don't want to deal with that. Just give me a locked 30. So at the end of the day, I do think 30 frames per second is playable, even in a lot of multiplayer games. Obviously, if you are playing a multiplayer game like Counter-Strike, I mean, who can't run Counter-Strike at 60 frames per second? But a game like Battlefield 4 or the upcoming Star Wars Battlefront, those games are a bit harder to run, and if you're only playing them at 30 FPS, yeah, you will be at a slight disadvantage, but I don't think it's anything far from playable. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. That's my stance on it. Just give me a frame rate lock and 30 FPS is alright. Obviously, in games, I prefer to have 60 frames per second, but I know a lot of you guys are on a budget, and that just isn't feasible for a lot of you guys. So let me know. I would love to hear from those of you with a budget and PC. How do you configure your settings, and what kind of frame rate do you look for in a game? I know I've talked about this quite a few number of times, but in this video, I just wanted to cover 30 FPS and why I think people hating on 30 FPS are kind of looking at it the wrong way. What I hate more than anything, like I said, is just a variable frame rate where the frame rate is all over the place. So like I said, let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think, and as always guys, have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out.